he would ask people to go and place bets for him and collect the winnings when his bets won, because obviously he couldn't show his face in the bookings. This was 14 mobile phones in a laptop that he'd be using and placing bets with his runners. It was a highly sophisticated operation, and I was banned. My account was closed after the first bet.
Okay, so first of all, thanks a lot for coming on this morning, Joseph. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
For people that aren't familiar with yourself, just to list a few things that you've done in the past. You are a data analyst. You've produced 4 books. I've read one of those books. Good quality books there on betting, sports betting, tipping. You are the manager of footballdata.co.uk. I think that's since 2001.
Yep.
You were an early runner possibly for Patrick Veitch. I think we'll come on to that shortly.
Yeah.
You write some good quality articles for Pinnacle, which Pinnacle puts out some good quality articles, broadly speaking anyway. And also you mentioned some stuff about Football Index in the past, which brought me around to yourself. So thanks for coming on. I think you can provide a lot of useful stuff for people to be watching this. So if we can just kick off straight away with the Patrick Veitch angle, what's the story there? Because I kind of read a few bits and it said maybe you run some bets, but maybe you didn't. And I know you also studied at Cambridge, so you were probably in the same circles.
Well, that's where he was. I mean, my running for him was very, very minor. It was just a few times, but I met him through what was he? He was when I joined in first year. Patrick was third year. He was a mathematician. And of course, he ended up failing his degree because he spent all his time doing analysis on the racing. And I remember the story, his tutor would keep telling him, Patrick, you've got to stop with this betting. It's going to end in tears. It's not a route to the future. And of course, it turned out that he made like tens of millions, I guess, in the end. I'm judging by the book that he wrote in 2008. He made a lot of money. So he was a third year when I was a first year, and So when you go to Cambridge, you kind of have, when you join, there's like the third years kind of act as your mentor for the first week, kind of to show you around and just make you feel comfortable.
And you got him?
Sorry, no, I didn't.
Oh,
I didn't. But my friend Peter, he did, and so he that's kind of how I got to know him. And so I would see him on and off during like the first few weeks, and I kind of got to know what he was doing and was really, really intrigued, because I was always loved sport, and it was just as you turn 18, you can start gambling. And Patrick was gambling at 15, but that's Patrick, and I'm not him. So that's kind of how I got to know him, and then I came across him more. By the time I got to a third year, I was sharing a room with Peter, and so I'd see a lot more of Patrick. He was then gone full time. He'd obviously left Cambridge University, and he was going full time. He'd carried on living in Cambridge, bought a house, and he was getting people to run his tip line. Peter would run his tips line like on Saturday morning, giving out racing tips. And he would ask people to go and place bets for him and collect the winnings when his bets won, because obviously he couldn't show his face in the bookings. This was all pre-internet days. So, and I did that a few times, and I was like always intrigued. I said, how much do you make a week and so on? And I just found it fascinating. So that was kind of my introduction. And he was kind of the guy that put the idea in my head that one day I'd like to do what he did. So I was just fascinated by the whole thing. So that was my connection, and I haven't seen him since probably, I don't know, 1992 maybe. I think the last time I saw him, I went out with him for a night out on the town, and I think he'd sold his Ferrari. He downgraded. He decided it's too much on the insurance, so he downgraded to I don't know what it was, a Mazda or something, but yeah, it was quite a fancy sports car, red sports car. So it was kind of nice just cruising around Cambridge, just in
lifestyle inflation.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know what he's got now. I think he goes around in a helicopter now, but yeah, or at least he was when he's moved to Yorkshire, because of course he had that story where he got into a bit of bother with a gangster, and who in the end,
I actually read the book. It's a good book. The one thing that I took, or maybe there was a few things I took from that possibly, but. Was it kind of like, I come to the conclusion that maybe he was sort of like beating the line via sort of, he was one of the first early adopters of sort of sectional timing, that kind of stuff, and beating the line in that way, rather than maybe some of the ways that things are jazzed up in the industry. And I'm sure you've probably got plenty to say on that in a bit. But do you think that's fair, or
I honestly, I don't know. He's a really, really intelligent guy. I mean, he was a prodigy. He actually got accepted to the university at 15, but because it's too young, so that's why he was gambling for 3 years and developing his skills. So he was a mathematical prodigy. So he was probably one of the early ones to go down that route. And he had started on, if you remember from the book, he tried other sports, and then he thought, well, racing has got a lot more variables that are difficult to model, and because I'm more intelligent than all the other bookmakers, I'll do it. So that's how he did it. And then I guess it's kind of accumulated advantage. Once you've got a little advantage, you can then win some bets, win some money, and then start putting more of your wealth into investing in more and more data analysis, which is what he was doing. And he what did he have? 5 years of video recordings of all the flat racing seasons. I mean, it's incredible what he had, and like something like 14 mobile phones in a laptop that he'd be using and placing bets with his runners. It was a highly sophisticated operation. So obviously with horse racing, where there's so much information that the bookmakers probably can't get hold of, and he obviously developed the skills where he could, and I guess it got to the point where he was having relationships with jockeys, and in the end he obviously became a horse race owner himself, didn't he? So by that stage it almost becomes kind of like inside information, doesn't it?
Yeah, where he ends up in the inside circles, and he talks about that in the book. It's quite interesting. But I guess I don't know what you do and don't know about some of the others, but sort of like the Bill Benters and the Tony Blooms, and that they all have there's strong overlaps in terms of collecting data, beating a lot of people face these problems now, but they were facing them a long time ago, getting kicked out of places and stuff. Yeah,
sadly my data collection was never as good as theirs, so I never got to the point where I could actually use it to beat the bookmakers.
Okay, so moving on then. So you obviously are a data analyst. You've written some good books. I've got one of them here, but you don't actually bet. Is that right?
I do bet for fun, and I did bet. Well, I'd never say I bet professionally because I never made my living from betting. So I spent maybe 4 years in the late 90s trying to develop systems that would make some profit, and kind of broke even over that time, and felt like this is going nowhere. So I decided one day, just on a betting forum, just to ask a question: would anyone want to pay for the data that I have? And the answers that I got back kind of led me to believe that there's something in this. I could set up a website, have a little subscription fee, and make a little bit of money that way, which is how football data started. And so from there, I made a few thousand in the first couple of years from selling subscriptions, and then just by chance, the affiliate industry took off. So bookmakers started advertising, and I was so wet behind the ears, didn't have a clue what they were asking me to do. Said, "Oh, can we put your banners up?" And then I was getting paid like these sort of weekly or monthly fees, and I thought, why am I getting paid? I didn't ask for this. I just thought I'd make my website look nice with their coloured banners, and then the penny dropped. It was like, I see, I'm getting paid for referrals.
So that's kind of interesting, because obviously I've got squares and sharps here, and you've said a lot about tipsters and stuff in the past, and I've given some hard rap in the past too. But it's interesting because in a way you actually derive a portion of your income from affiliate stuff that comes from the bookmakers, which we're actually given a hard time.
Yeah, well, I make no bones about that. That's how. I say on the website I make profits from other people's losses, but then I guess everyone does in the betting industry. I often get these moral judgments cast upon me sometimes because I'm an affiliate, but we're all in the same boat in a way. I know that I don't. People say, well, you take no risk because when the bookmakers lose, you don't have to pay them. Well, that's true, but when you're running a business and it's your livelihood, you have to take the risk of actually. When I got redundancy, I had to take the challenge. Do I go down this route and take the risk that I actually may earn no money, and then I'm out of the employment loop, and then what the hell do I do? So there are risks involved with regard becoming a professional affiliate.
Of course, no, and there's no problems with that. But I just find that interesting, the way it feeds into. And I guess the next thing that I was going to ask you is, you say in your Twitter bio, self-identified sort of cynic, and I think that's completely fair because there's a lot of dirty stuff that happens in the industry, and I hate it. And I come from, and I think back to my early mind before I got involved with trading, and I sort of looked at punting, and I would follow the racing posts and all these different things that were kind of traps set off to send you in different directions, and then generate affiliates, bookmakers, revenue, stuff like that. But I guess what I'm wondering is, if they're paying you, and then obviously you write these books and you make these good points, have you not kind of been had any kickback for that, or have you not had a hard time for that? Have you been censored or sort of had legal
Do you mean
stuff
from the bookmakers or from
the bookmakers? Sorry, yeah, that's what I mean. Yeah.
No, I don't know how much they know about what else that I do. I suspect some of them have known. For example, Blue Square. I opened a betting account with them, and they've gone now. They were bought by Betfair, I think, and Betfair just shut the brand down. They just took the database and shut it down. But and I was banned. My account was closed after the first bet, I guess because it beat the closing line. But I always wonder, I thought, well, look, one bet, seriously, would they do that to like a random punter? And I thought maybe it's because they know my name and they think, okay, this guy knows what he's doing. He writes a lot of stuff, so we're just going to shut him down straight away and say nothing. So I would never know. I didn't.
But is it possible? I guess because you think the people at these companies are probably reading books like this, so they might do that. But on the other hand, I think that they've probably got like however many million affiliates, and you're probably just a number in the database.
It could be. I mean, in the past, I've been one of the bigger affiliates. There's no doubt about that. But I'm certainly on Bet365. I guess I've always trodden kind of the neutral ground. I've been trying to slightly, in terms of being an affiliate, I'm not one of these affiliates that likes to, shall we say, promote bets that are going to increase their profit margin by accumulate. I'm totally against that stuff. I'm neutral and I'm passive, and I say, look, this is the reality. You sign up accounts through me. Nearly all of you are going to lose money, and I'm going to get paid because of it.
But that allows you to produce your data sets and your website. So,
but equally, at the same time, I can write stuff that helps people become betters, if you see what I mean.
No, yes.
And I suppose there was a little bit I got from Bet365 where, I mean, it was more to do with the gambling regulations in terms of advertising, as it when it got really big a few years ago and Sky Bet closed their affiliate program. I was asked by 365 they said I had some content which I think it was sure bets and also learn to win. And there were certain phrases that they decided we can't have that on there because it's kind of encouraging people to believe that they can win, which I never did.
I see what that is, and I think that's probably just a very broad tarred with the same brush. But I was just interested because I've actually had, believe it or not, I've had legal stuff levelled at me in the past for kind of saying this is a trap, kind of like, and I won't say what it is specifically because I can't be bothered with having it again. But like, you know, people push out prices that maybe you can't get sometimes, and that's their way of doing tipsters and having a nice result over a longer period of term. And then they kind of, it's very controlled, isn't it? The industry is very controlled, and I just wondered if you've not had that.
Not really. I mean, just the things that I've mentioned, I've never really been censored. I've never been sanctioned in any way. One or two bookmakers have asked me to remove a particular piece of content because it doesn't fit with the current regulation.
Yeah, which leads me straight on to the next thing. So in terms of regulation, it's a hot topic. Everyone's got a different angle from it. We had a bookmaker on previously in one of the other videos who gave a different slice. What do you think that is right, how things are going right now in terms of sort of affordability, restrictions, limitation, that kind of stuff? And if not, what do you think that could potentially be a better solution if there is one that you've got?
I'm on both sides of the fence here. I really, really sympathise with people that have their accounts closed for being able to beat the closing line or to have expected value. I'm one myself, and I've had my accounts closed, and it's kind of galling. You think, I'm intelligent enough to beat these prices, and they won't let me. This can't be right. This can't be fair. There's no honour in this. But on the other hand, it's a business to them, and it's the most profitable way they make money. And if they were required by law, if what we call recreational bookmakers in the UK were required by law to accept all bets on all sports, up to obviously a certain, like they do in Australia with racing, up to like whatever, it'd be $2,000, there would be consequences. And the main consequence of that would be that the majority of people that can now beat those odds would not be able to beat those odds anymore because they would change. The bookmakers would be forced to become more efficient, more accurate, like Pinnacle, for example.
Yeah.
And it might mean a reduction in the number of markets that are available. Now, 95% of punters either don't know how to beat these odds or don't really care because they see betting as a form of fun, entertainment and recreation. And so the bookmakers in the UK take the view that it's worth annoying the 5% that do want to make the effort to win with wits, as I've said, because it's more profitable for them and they keep the other 95% happy. So I get both sides of the argument. It's really, really frustrating. I suppose if I was to try and make a compromise, which is what I've said in the past, my compromise position may be, it's not much of a compromise for people that are going to get banned, but at least legislate so that the bookmakers have to be more honest about why they are limiting it, and they can't just hide behind their terms and conditions. We reserve the right to close accounts without giving explanation. I think that probably ought to change. It should be. I'm really one for honesty in anything, but particularly the gambling industry. And I think if there was more honesty as to why you might get closed, and people knew up front what they could expect in terms of would they waste their time opening an account and giving all of their personal data, handing it over and so on with regard to making deposits, then obviously making withdrawals, and then to find out that you're not even allowed to do it. It's like, what was the point? Why couldn't you have told me these things?
This is the argument that I've made in the past, and I think the one thing that maybe I thought would be that they should say, kind of like, okay, maybe an extreme example, when you pick up a packet of cigarettes, it says smoking kills people. I feel as though a lot of the marketing and advertising is actually lying, and they should be made to say somewhere in there, we don't have to accept bets from you if you win, or something like that. I don't know.
Yeah. Explain why and even what that means. I mean, what's his name? Richard Flynn, the ex-CEO of Sky Bet, would say, we don't close winning accounts. Well, I know you don't close winning accounts, but you're not being honest about what you mean by winning. We're not talking about people who are profitable, because nearly everyone who's profitable is just lucky. We're talking about people that can find an edge and an expected value. That's what we're talking about. He knows that, but he's clever with the words. He does not that it matters to him now, because he's not part of Sky Bet anymore, but it was frustrating at the time when he would say those things in front of the parliamentary committee. And it's like, Richard, you know that we know that you're bullshitting here, but just be honest about this, and then we're all okay. Then at least we all know where we stand, and then people who want to aspire to that can then try and do it at Betfair, or try and do it at an Asian bookmaker or Pinnacle or whatever, if they can find a way of doing it. And then actually they'd find it a lot harder, because recreational prices in the UK I can beat them, through my wisdom of the crowds methodology. It's not difficult, but only 5%
it's really not hard once you've got the right parts, is it? But of course, it's just a corporate skullduggery, and I think the fact to say we don't close them, it's like, but you do limit them to £1, which what's the point in placing a bet on anything?
Well, it's to keep them open so they might go off to the games in the casino, isn't it?
Of course,
and that's the bit that's kind of that I don't like. It's not that it's dishonest. It's kind of disingenuous, and it's like, if you just treat people with a bit more respect and as adults and grown-ups, and then maybe people would feel a little bit more comfortable about why they have to limit them. And I get why they do it, because it's a business model, and a lot of them are answerable to shareholders.
Yeah.
And that's just how it is. And now, if you want that changed, I guess you need to change in the law, but that could be a really difficult thing to do.
I think there definitely needs to be some change, especially after what we've seen with Football Index. But just before we come on to that, you mentioned Pinnacle there. You've written some articles for Pinnacle. I've read some of them, good quality. And Pinnacle puts out really good quality content compared to a lot of the other. It's a lot more original, I think, a lot of the time. I guess that costs them a lot more money. But I don't know if there's some extra stuff you want to share, because I don't really know a huge amount about Pinnacle, because obviously it's not accessible in the UK.
They're what you would call the sharps bookmaker. They're a sharp bookmaker, so their business model is completely different. It's not about advertising. It's about data analysis and about getting the right line or the right number. And as a result, they have to have very tight margins, and they have to have big turnover. So that's why they will accept winners, and the winners are kind of used. Well, Marco Bloom, the trading director, he calls them his clients, and he will use them to improve their lines and to make them more and more efficient. And obviously they get a lot of their turnover from turnover from arbitrage, because they're always on the right side of the arbitrage, and they'll be collecting turnover from punters that are actually betting both sides and using the recreational bookmakers, which is why recreational bookmakers hate the arbors, because they're on the wrong side, and they know they're on the wrong side.
It must be an expensive business to run, though, being data first rather than marketing, and then
it's a hugely expensive way to do it. But they've been doing it for 20 years, and they've been doing it well. It'd be very, very difficult to do it again. I've said a little bit about this actually in my new book, which will be out in December, Monte Carlo or Bust. It's really, really difficult to replicate this model, and I mean, ultimately, it's easier to be a recreational bookmaker, frankly, and that's why Pinnacle left the UK in, I think it was 2014. It was just at the time we had the point of consumption tax, which was 15%, And I suspect they left because it's just too expensive to be able to accommodate that. I think Sporting Index bought Pinnacle, I think, so a year or two after that, and they were looking to return. Well, that got shelved, I guess, again, because the point of consumption tax went up to 21%, I believe. So they're not coming back.
I guess it's a little bit how Betfair's gone in a way. That, you know, the exchange shots at the top, but then they've realised it's easier just to put a casino and all this soft stuff on top. And
I guess I don't know their financials, but I guess they make more money now from the fixed odds platform. And it was always a puzzle to me. Why did they go down the fixed odds route when they've got this great exchange? Well, it's profit. It's an easier model to run. They make more money, and this is because the turnover is from 95% of customers will be higher than the 5% that are trying to beat the line.
Yeah.
Most punters just want a punt. They don't care. It's just for entertainment. It's like I'll put the match on my favourite team. I'll bet on them. That's how it is for most people, and that's fine. It's like going to the cinema, and that's perfectly acceptable.
There's a different agenda to what the founders, maybe Andrew Black and the like, had in mind when they started. But you know, obviously they've subsequently left.
Yeah.
So your book here, Squares and Sharps, there's heavy emphasis on the psychology. I find that fascinating in gambling.
Yeah.
And we had a taste of some psychology earlier in the year, which probably has brought us together here now, if anything, because I was aware of your presence, but I'd read this book. I haven't read the other books, and it is a good book, by the way, for anyone that's watching. But what was your take on that? Because you actually spotted that before me as well. I didn't realise until after I'd managed to cause a bit of a...
Well, I first came across it, I think it was December 19, maybe January 2020, when I think I was asked to comment about it, and I looked at it, and I did a Google, and some people were saying it's a Ponzi, and I thought, is it really? Let's have a look at it. And it did look a lot like... I mean, a Ponzi is something that's intentionally delivered, it's with a view to defrauding people by just churning new money after old. I don't think it was ever set up like that.
No,
I re-described it as a castle in the air phenomenon, which is, to all intents and purposes, very similar. It's basically it's a market built on hubris, and that's exactly what Football Index was. It was just people buying more and more player shares just on the basis that they thought it was going to go up. And so it was reinflated, self-reinflating. So someone tells them, mate, yeah, you go and stick all your money in this, and they do it. And a little bit like Bitcoin, a little bit like tulips in a way, I suppose. It's just a market based on hubris and overconfidence and the belief that it will never fail. I had a friend actually back in 2007, maybe just before the financial crash, and he had this house, and he said, he had it on the market, and I said, take that price. He said, no, I can do better than that. The prices won't go down. They'll never go down. I said, mate, whatever goes up comes down. And then, of course, the financial crash hit. He's still trying to sell it now, 12 years later.
Oh, really?
At the same price that he would have got if he'd taken it in 2000. Not that it matters now. He's gone off to Australia and he's got a nice life, but that's a different story.
Hindsight's a wonderful thing, but I think that these patterns, and they'll happen again into the future, and you see it now.
They will keep happening.
Some of the NFTs and this kind of stuff as well. But I found that the psychology element absolutely fascinating. That because and I feel sorry for the victims of Football Index and the money they've lost, because it's unfair and it's still ongoing. But the psychology behind it of how people behaved, I was thinking, wow, these are the people that are kind of like on the other end of the bets on the exchange when I'm trading, or you see other people possibly trying to trade, and you see fear in the market and it flies off at an angle. But the whole thing just completely fascinated me. It leaves me...
Well, it's fascinating in the sense that it's perfectly human. I mean, if you really want to read a book about why we behave in this way, in these kind of environments, these kind of market risk-taking markets of uncertainty. It's Daniel Kahneman's Thinking Fast and Slow. That's kind of the Bible, which it's a hard read, it's a grind, but it will really give you an idea of how we are just loaded with psychological bias when it comes to these sorts of decision makings in conditions of uncertainty.
Yeah, it's a great book, and I think that's the perfect depiction with the gambling industry being a zero-sum game a lot of the time. That's just how it's built up, isn't it? With the marketing and whatnot and stuff like that. But I hope they do get their money back.
I hope, more importantly, if they do, that they learn lessons. In life is really, I've learned some lessons from some terrible mistakes for sure. But it's about life is too much of life, especially with regards to risk taking, is It's a roller coaster of fear and greed, and it's learning the lessons of where those things appear and how to moderate that roller coaster and try and make more sensible, rational decisions rather than taking them on the basis of hubris or whatever someone else says, and just this belief that it's going to be great, or even when it goes the other way, that the belief it's going to be a disaster. I've had, again, a friend of mine when there was the dot-com crash in 99 or 2000, and they sold all their shares. And I said, no, you don't go doing that, because some will be crazy, but some will fail, but there'll be others and they'll come back. And the same what we saw with the pandemic. There was a 30% crash, and now some things like Amazon and Google are double what they were pre-pandemic. So it works both ways, and it's kind of it's like a professional trader like yourself, for example, to keep stripping out the emotion and trying to make more rational decision making. It's really, really difficult for a human being because we are primed to do those things.
And of course, it works both ways. But as with all betting, people remember when they're winning, but they don't seem to remember when they're losing, which Absolutely. was a very unfortunate.
Well, that's your overconfidence bias, the self-serving bias. You come up with explanations. So when you're winning, it's my intelligence that did that. Yeah. When you're losing, that's just bad luck. It'll fix itself in the end, and that's not how it is.
Nice. Well, so you've got a book coming out in December. Did you say it was?
I have. It's called Monte Carlo or Bust, and the subtitle is Aspiring Simulations. No, how is it? Simple Simulations for Aspiring Sports Bettors. So it's really a lot about the Monte Carlo simulation. So there's a chapter on modelling, forecast modelling. Then I've got a chapter on using simulations for modelling your range of possible wins and losses. I've got a chapter on losing streaks and drawdowns. Another little bit on tipping and using Monte Carlo simulations to try and identify tipsters who might be cheating, that sort of thing.
Brilliant. Okay, well, I'll try and find a link and put that in the description.
It's already listed on major bookstores like Amazon and Waterstones and so on, but it's not actually out until, well, I've been told 2nd of December. In fact, I just last week I got the final corrected manuscript back to the publisher, so maybe it'll be quicker than that. They told me 2nd of December.
Okay, so just one last question before we part then. Have you got any sort of broad value for people watching this? Broad input in terms of value betting, staking, that kind of stuff that you can sort of impart on them?
I can tell you, go and look at my Wisdom of Crowds method. It'll help you win in the long term. It'll also help your accounts get closed. If you want to win at Betfair or at Pinnacle, talk to someone like yourself. I can't give you that information because I never could do it myself.
That's brilliant. Okay, well, thanks for coming on, Joseph. I appreciate it, and best of luck with the book.
Thank you very much, Caan.